The mall was a kaleidoscope of chaos, screaming kids, flickering neon signs, and the relentless hum of 1,000 voices colliding. Grant stood frozen at the edge of the food court, clutching a smoothie, his heart pounding louder than the pop music blasting overhead. He'd spent years hiding the truth, but today, with Liam by his side, the weight of his secret felt like it might finally break him. Grant, 25, had always been the quiet one, the guy who blended into the background of his small Ohio town before moving to Chicago for a fresh start. With his dark hair and sharp features, he turned heads, but never noticed, or maybe he just didn't want to. He'd spent too long burying his feelings, especially for Liam, his best friend since their college days at Northwestern. Liam, with his easy grin and blue eyes that could charm a brick wall, was the kind of straight guy who made everyone feel like they mattered. But to Grant, he was more than that. He was everything. Today was supposed to be simple, a Saturday shopping trip to pick out clothes for Liam's new job. Grant had agreed to help, partly because he loved Liam's company, partly because he couldn't say no to those eyes. They'd spent the morning weaving through stores, laughing over Liam's terrible taste in ties and Grant's knack for finding the perfect jacket. It felt normal, safe, until it didn't. "Grant, you're overthinking it," Liam said, nudging him as they stood outside a sleek menswear store. His leather jacket hugged his broad shoulders, and the way he tilted his head made Grant's stomach flip. "Just pick something. I trust you." Grant forced a smile, his fingers tightening around the smoothie cup. "Yeah, because your last choice screamed midlife crisis at 26. He gestured to the garish yellow tie Liam had held up earlier, earning a laugh that lit up the whole damn mall. They stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of cedar and new fabric. Grant busied himself flipping through racks of shirts, trying to focus on colors and cuts instead of the way Liam's arm brushed his when they reached for the same hanger. It was nothing, he told himself. Just two friends shopping. Just Liam being Liam, touchy, warm, oblivious. But then Liam grabbed a navy blazer and held it up to Grant. "Try this on. It'd look good on you." His voice was casual, but his eyes lingered a beat too long, and Grant's breath caught. He slipped on the blazer, feeling Liam's gaze like a physical touch. "Damn, man," Liam said, stepping closer, adjusting the collar with a gentleness that made Grant's skin burn. "You clean up nice." Grant mumbled a thanks, his face hot, and turned away to hide the flush creeping up his neck. He didn't trust himself to speak, not when Liam was standing so close, smelling like cedar and that stupid cologne Grant had helped him pick out last year. They moved through the store, piling up clothes for Liam's new marketing gig, a job that would take him to New York in a month. The thought twisted something sharp in Grant's chest. A month. For weeks until Liam was gone, taking half of Grant's heart with him. By the time they reached the checkout, Grant was a mess of nerves, his mind replaying every glance, every touch. He stood behind Liam, watching him joke with the cashier, all easy charm and confidence. Grant's eyes traced the line of Liam's jaw, the way his hair caught the light, and he hated himself for it. Liam was straight. He'd dated women, talked about crushes, never once hinted at anything else. Grant had spent years convincing himself that friendship was enough, that loving Liam from a distance was safe. Then it happened. Liam reached back, his hand finding Grant's, their fingers interlocking like it was the most natural thing in the world. Grant froze, his pulse roaring in his ears. The cashier didn't notice, too busy scanning shirts, but to Grant, the world narrowed to that single point of contact, Liam's warm, steady grip, his thumb brushing lightly against Grant's knuckles. It wasn't an accident. It couldn't be. Not when Liam turned his head just enough to meet Grant's eyes, a quiet intensity in his gaze that said more than words ever could. "Ready?" Liam asked, his voice soft, like he was asking something bigger. Grant nodded, unable to speak, his hand still in Liam's as they left the store. The mall's noise faded, replaced by the deafening rhythm of his own heartbeat. What the hell was happening? They walked in silence, hands still clasped, weaving through the crowd. Grant's mind raced, torn between hope and fear. Liam had never done this before, never crossed that line. Was it a fluke? A moment of impulse? Or was it something more, something Grant had been too scared to dream of? They stopped at a quiet corner near a fountain, the water's soft rush filling the space between them. Liam let go of Grant's hand, and the loss felt like a punch. He ran a hand through his blonde hair, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Grant," he started, then stopped, his eyes searching Grant's face. I don't know how to say this." Grant's heart sank. Here it was, the moment Liam would laugh it off, call it a joke, and shatter whatever fragile hope Grant had let himself feel. But Liam didn't laugh. He stepped closer, close enough that Grant could see the flecks of green in his blue eyes, the faint stubble on his jaw. "I've been thinking about this for a while," Liam said, his voice low, raw. "About you. About us." Grant's breath hitched. "What are you saying?" Liam swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I'm saying I don't know what I am anymore. Straight, bi, whatever. But I know how I feel about you. And it's not just friendly." The words hit Grant like a tidal wave, washing away years of doubt and denial. He wanted to laugh, to cry, to pull Liam into his arms and never let go. But fear held him back, the fear that had kept him silent for so long. "Liam, you're leaving in a month," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happens then?" Liam's face fell, but he didn't look away. "I don't know, but I know I can't leave without telling you the truth." The fountain's spray misted the air, catching the light in tiny rainbows. Grant stood there, caught between the life he'd always known and the one he'd never dared imagine. Liam was offering him something he'd wanted for years, but it came with a ticking clock. A month. For weeks to figure out what this was, what it could be. "Say something," Liam pleaded, his voice breaking. Grant opened his mouth, but no words came. Instead, he reached out, his fingers brushing Liam's wrist, a silent promise that he wasn't running away. Not yet. Grant's fingers lingered on Liam's wrist, the touch grounding him as his mind spun. The mall's hum faded, leaving only the sound of water cascading in the fountain and the uneven rhythm of his own breathing. He wanted to believe Liam's words, to let himself fall into the possibility of us, but doubt clawed at him, sharp and familiar. "Liam," Grant said finally, his voice unsteady. "You can't just say that and expect me to know what to do with it." He pulled his hand back, shoving it into his pocket to hide the tremble. "You're straight. You've always been straight. And now you're telling me this, right before you leave." Liam's face tightened, a flicker of pain crossing his features. "I know it's messy. I know I'm late. But I'm not playing with you, Grant. This is real." Grant wanted to scream that real didn't change the fact that Liam was moving 800 miles away. Instead, he turned toward the fountain, watching the water ripple under the lights. "How long?" he asked quietly. "How long have you been thinking about this?" Liam hesitated, then stepped closer, his shoulder brushing Grant's. "Since last summer. That night at the lake house, when we stayed up talking until dawn. You were, I don't know. You were you, and I couldn't stop looking at you. It freaked me out, man. I didn't know what it meant." Grant remembered that night, fireflies dancing over the water, the two of them sprawled on a blanket, sharing a bottle of cheap wine. He'd felt it too, the pull, the way Liam's laugh made his chest ache. But he'd buried it, like always. "Why didn't you say anything then?" he asked, turning to face Liam. "Because I was scared," Liam admitted, his voice raw. "Scared of what it meant, of what people would think. Scared of losing you if I got it wrong." He laughed, a bitter sound. "Guess I'm still scared. But I'm more scared of leaving without trying." Grant's heart twisted. He wanted to be angry, to demand why Liam had waited until now, when the clock was ticking. But the vulnerability in Liam's eyes stopped him. This wasn't the confident, carefree Liam everyone knew. This was someone laying himself bare, risking everything. "Okay," Grant said softly. "So what now?" Liam's lips curved into a tentative smile. "Come with me. To New York. Just for a weekend. Let's figure this out together." Grant blinked, caught off guard. "A weekend? Liam, that's a lot." "I know," Liam said quickly. "But I don't want to rush this here, with everyone watching. Just us, no pressure. We can talk, figure out what this is. Please, Grant." The idea was reckless, impossible. Grant had a job, a life in Chicago. But the thought of Liam leaving without knowing what could have been was worse. "I'll think about it," he said finally, his voice barely audible over the fountain. Liam nodded, relief softening his features. "That's enough for now." They left the mall, the shopping bags forgotten in the weight of the moment. Over the next few days, Grant couldn't shake Liam's words. They followed him to work, to the quiet moments in his apartment, to the sleepless nights where he stared at the ceiling, imagining a life where he didn't have to hide. He'd come out to his parents years ago, a painful conversation that ended in strained acceptance. But loving Liam had always been a secret he kept even from himself. On Wednesday, Liam texted, "Coffee? Need to see you." Grant agreed, meeting him at a cozy cafe in Wicker Park. Liam was already there, nursing a latte, his hair a mess from the autumn wind. He looked nervous, and it made Grant's chest tighten. "You okay?" Grant asked, sliding into the seat across from him. Liam nodded, but his eyes were restless. "I keep thinking about Saturday. About you. I don't want to mess this up, Grant." Grant sipped his coffee, the bitterness grounding him. "You're not messing anything up. I'm just trying to process. You've had months to think about this. I've had 4 days." Liam leaned forward, his voice low. "I know, and I'm sorry for dropping it on you like this. But I've spent too long pretending I didn't feel something. I don't want to pretend anymore." Grant's throat tightened. He wanted to reach across the table, to take Liam's hand like he had at the mall. But fear held him back. Not fear of Liam, but of what it would mean to let himself hope. "I'm coming to New York," he said suddenly, the words surprising even himself. "1 weekend. That's all I can promise." Liam's face lit up, a grin breaking through the tension. "That's more than enough." The rest of the week was a blur. Grant booked a flight, his stomach churning with nerves and something dangerously close to excitement. He told himself it was just a trip, a chance to talk, to understand. But deep down, he knew it was more. It was a leap into the unknown, with Liam as his only anchor. They flew out on Friday, the plane cutting through a sky streaked with pink and gold. Chicago faded below them, and Grant felt the weight of his old life slipping away. Liam sat beside him, their knees brushing in the cramped seats, and for the first time in years, Grant let himself imagine a future where he wasn't alone. New York was a whirlwind of noise and color, a city that felt like it could swallow them whole. They checked into a small hotel in Brooklyn, the kind with exposed brick walls and overpriced coffee. Liam insisted on carrying Grant's bag, a small gesture that felt impossibly big. That night, they walked the streets, the city's pulse matching Grant's own. They talked about everything and nothing. Liam's new job, Grant's art projects, the way the skyline glittered like a promise. At a quiet bar in Williamsburg, Liam reached for Grant's hand again, this time with purpose. "I'm not good at this," he said, his voice soft over the hum of the crowd. "But I want to be. For you." Grant's heart pounded, but he didn't pull away. He squeezed Liam's hand, a silent answer, and for the first time, he let himself believe that this could be real. The Brooklyn bar was dim, its amber lights casting shadows across Liam's face as he held Grant's hand. The air buzzed with conversation, but to Grant, it was just them, 2 men caught in a moment that felt too fragile to last. He wanted to freeze time, to hold onto the warmth of Liam's fingers, the quiet certainty in his eyes. They left the bar close to midnight, stepping into the cool October night. The city thrummed around them, alive with honking cabs and distant laughter. Liam didn't let go of Grant's hand as they walked, and Grant didn't pull away. It felt like a test, like the universe was daring them to see how far this could go. "You're quiet," Liam said, glancing at him as they crossed a street lined with brownstones. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Grant laughed softly, the sound more nervous than he intended. "Just trying to keep up. This is a lot, Liam. You, me, New York. It's like we're in some movie, and I'm waiting for the plot twist." Liam stopped walking, turning to face him under a flickering street lamp. "No plot twists," he said, his voice steady. "Just us. I meant what I said, Grant. I'm in this." Grant's chest ached with the weight of those words. He wanted to believe them, but years of hiding had taught him to brace for disappointment. "What happens when you move here?" he asked. "When you're starting your new life, and I'm back in Chicago. What's this look like then?" Liam's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "I don't have all the answers, but I know I want you in my life. Not just as my best friend. As more." The word hung between them, heavy with possibility. Grant's breath caught, and before he could overthink it, he stepped closer, closing the gap. Their lips met, tentative at first, then deepening with a hunger that had been building for years. Liam's hands found Grant's waist, pulling him closer, and for a moment, the world disappeared. When they pulled apart, Grant's heart was racing, his lips tingling. Liam's eyes were bright, a mix of awe and relief. "Okay," Liam said, a grin breaking through. That was worth the wait. Grant laughed, the sound shaky but real. You're an idiot. Yeah, Liam said, still grinning. But I'm your idiot. They spent the rest of the weekend exploring the city, each moment layered with new meaning. They wandered through Central Park, stealing kisses under golden trees. They ate greasy pizza at a hole-in-the-wall joint, laughing when sauce dripped on Liam's shirt. Every touch, every glance, felt like a promise that this was real, that it could last. But reality crept in on Sunday morning. They sat in a cafe, nursing coffee and bagels, when Liam's phone buzzed with a text from his new boss. The job started in 2 weeks, earlier than planned. Grant's stomach dropped, the weight of distance settling back in. 2 weeks, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. That's soon. Liam nodded, his expression grim. Yeah, they want me to start training early. I didn't expect this. Grant stared at his coffee, the steam curling like his thoughts. So what do we do? Long distance? Visits? Or? He trailed off, afraid to voice the alternative. Liam reached across the table, his hand covering Grant's. We make it work. I'm not losing you, Grant. Not after this. Grant wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at him. Long distance was brutal, and they were just starting. What if Liam changed his mind? What if New York swallowed him up, and Grant became a memory? They flew back to Chicago that night, the plane ride quieter than the one out. Grant leaned against Liam's shoulder, memorizing the feel of him, the scent of his cologne. When they landed, Liam drove Grant home, the city lights blurring past. At Grant's apartment, they lingered in the car, neither wanting to say goodbye. 2 weeks, Liam said, his voice low. Let's make them count. Grant nodded, his throat tight. Yeah, let's do that. The next week was a blur of stolen moments. They met for dinner, watched movies on Grant's couch, kissed until they were breathless. But the clock was relentless, each day bringing Liam's departure closer. Grant threw himself into work, sketching designs for his graphic design job, but his mind kept drifting to Liam, to the way his laugh filled a room, the way his hand felt in Grant's. On Friday, Liam showed up at Grant's office unannounced, a nervous energy in his eyes. I need to show you something, he said, pulling Grant outside. They walked to a nearby park, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. Liam stopped at a bench, pulling out a small notebook. I've been writing, he said, flipping it open. Stuff I couldn't say out loud. Grant took the notebook, his hands shaking as he read. It was a letter, raw and unpolished, filled with Liam's thoughts, his confusion, his fear, his love. I didn't know I could feel like this, he'd written. You make me want to be brave. Grant's eyes stung, and he looked up to find Liam watching him, vulnerable and open. You wrote this for me? Grant asked, his voice breaking. Liam nodded. I needed you to know. No matter what happens, this is real. Grant pulled him into a hug, burying his face in Liam's shoulder. For the first time, he let himself believe that they could make this work, that love could be enough. The notebook trembled in Grant's hands, Liam's words searing into his heart. The park around them was quiet, the late afternoon sun filtering through bare branches, casting long shadows across the grass. Grant wanted to hold on to this moment, to keep Liam close, but the ticking clock loomed over them like a storm cloud. They sat on the bench, shoulders touching, the notebook resting between them. You didn't have to do this, Grant said, his voice thick with emotion. But I'm glad you did. Liam's smile was soft, almost shy. I'm not good with words, not like you. But I needed you to know how much you mean to me. Before I go. The word go hit Grant like a punch. He'd been trying to ignore it, to focus on the now. Their kisses, their laughter, the way Liam's hand felt in his. But New York was coming, and with it, the uncertainty of distance. What if it's too hard? Grant asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What if we can't make it work? Liam's hand found his, their fingers lacing together. Then we'll figure it out. Together. I'm not giving up on us, Grant. Grant nodded, wanting to believe him, but fear lingered like a shadow. They spent the rest of the evening walking through the park, talking about everything except the future. Liam told stories about his childhood in Indiana, about the time he tried to build a treehouse and nearly broke his arm. Grant shared memories of his own, quiet nights sketching in his room, dreaming of a life where he didn't have to hide who he was. That night, they ended up at Liam's apartment, a small place cluttered with books and half-packed boxes. The sight of those boxes twisted something in Grant's chest, a reminder of how little time they had left. They cooked dinner together, a simple pasta dish that turned into a mess of spilled sauce and laughter. Afterward, they curled up on the couch, Liam's arm around Grant's shoulders, a movie playing in the background that neither of them watched. "I'm going to miss this," Grant said, his head resting against Liam's chest. Liam's fingers traced circles on Grant's arm. "Me too. But we'll have more nights like this. I promise." Grant wanted to believe him, but the boxes in the corner mocked that hope. He closed his eyes, focusing on the steady rhythm of Liam's heartbeat, trying to anchor himself in the moment. The next few days were a whirlwind. Liam was busy with work, tying up loose ends before the move, but they stole moments whenever they could: a quick coffee, a late-night walk, a kiss stolen in the elevator. Each moment felt precious, fragile, like it could slip away if Grant held on too tightly. On Wednesday, Grant's phone buzzed with a text from his sister. "Mia, how's it going with Liam? You okay?" Mia was one of the few people Grant had told about his feelings for Liam, back when he thought they'd never be more than friends. She'd always been his rock, the one who listened without judgment. He called her, needing to hear her voice. "It's complicated," he said, pacing his apartment. "He's moving to New York, and I don't know what we're doing." Mia's voice was gentle but firm. "Grant, you've spent years being careful, keeping people at arm's length. If Liam's worth it, take the risk. You deserve to be happy." Her words stayed with him, echoing through the sleepless nights that followed. On Friday, Liam invited Grant to a going-away party at a bar downtown. Grant hesitated, dreading the crowd, the questions, the inevitable goodbyes. But he went, because it was Liam. The bar was packed, the air thick with music and laughter. Liam's friends from work and college filled the space, their voices loud and cheerful. Grant stayed close to Liam, feeling out of place among people who didn't know the truth about them. Liam seemed to sense it, his hand brushing Grant's under the table, a quiet reassurance. As the night wore on, Liam pulled Grant outside to a quiet alley behind the bar. The city hummed around them, but it felt like they were the only two people in the world. "I'm sorry if this is overwhelming," Liam said, his breath visible in the cool night air. "I just wanted you here." Grant smiled, his nerves settling. "I'm glad I came. I don't know how to do this, Liam. The whole world knowing." Liam's eyes softened. "We don't have to tell the world. Not yet. Just you and me, figuring it out." Grant nodded, his throat tight. They stood there, foreheads touching, the city fading into the background. For the first time, Grant felt like he could breathe, like he could be himself without fear. But the next morning, reality crashed back in. Liam called, his voice tense. "My boss needs me in New York tomorrow. They're moving up the start date again." Grant's heart sank. "Tomorrow? That's too soon." "I know," Liam said, sounding as shaken as Grant felt. "Come with me, just for a couple of days. We'll figure out the rest." Grant hesitated, his mind racing. He had work, responsibilities, a life in Chicago. But the thought of letting Liam go without trying was unbearable. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll come." They spent the day packing, the air heavy with unspoken fears. That night, as they lay in Liam's bed, Grant traced the lines of Liam's face, committing every detail to memory. "We're going to be okay," Liam whispered, his voice fierce with determination. Grant nodded, holding on to those words like a lifeline. But as they boarded the plane the next morning, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into something bigger than either of them could control. New York greeted them with a biting wind and a sky heavy with clouds. Grant clutched his jacket as they stepped out of the airport, the city's energy overwhelming after the quiet of the plane. Liam's hand found his, a steady anchor in the chaos. And for a moment, Grant felt like they could face anything. They checked into a hotel near Liam's new office, a sleek building in Midtown that felt worlds away from their Chicago lives. Liam was due to start work the next morning, leaving them one day to navigate the city and their future. Grant tried to focus on the present, on the way Liam's eyes lit up as they explored Times Square, the neon lights reflecting in his gaze. They ate hot dogs from a street cart, laughing as mustard dripped onto Liam's scarf. They wandered through bookstores, arguing over which novel was better, their hands brushing as they reached for the same book. Every moment felt like a gift, but the weight of tomorrow hung over them, unspoken but ever-present. That night, they sat on the hotel bed, the city skyline glittering through the window. Liam pulled Grant close, his lips brushing Grant's forehead. "I don't want you to go back," he said, his voice raw. "I know it's selfish, but I want you here." Grant's heart ached. "I want that too. But my life's in Chicago, Liam. My job, my family. I can't just leave." Liam nodded, his jaw tight. "I know. I hate the idea of being so far from you." They fell silent, the weight of distance settling between them. Grant wanted to promise that they'd make it work, that love would be enough, but the words felt hollow. Instead, he kissed Liam, pouring everything he couldn't say into the press of their lips. The next morning, Liam left for his first day at work, promising to be back by evening. Grant spent the day alone, wandering the city, his thoughts a tangled mess. He ended up at the High Line, the elevated park quiet in the early morning chill. He sat on a bench, watching joggers and tourists pass, and let himself think about what he wanted, not just for now, but for the future. He loved Liam. That much was clear, a truth he couldn't deny anymore. But love wasn't a plan. It wasn't a job, a home, a life. He thought about Mia's words, about taking risks, about deserving happiness. Could he build a life here, with Liam? Or was he setting himself up for heartbreak? When Liam returned that evening, he looked exhausted but happy, his tie loosened and his hair a mess. "How was it?" Grant asked, forcing a smile. "Intense," Liam said, collapsing onto the bed. "But good. They're excited to have me, and the team's great. But I kept thinking about you all day." Grant's chest tightened. "I was thinking about you too." Liam sat up, his eyes searching Grant's. "What's wrong? You look, I don't know, scared." Grant laughed, the sound brittle. "I am scared. This is all happening so fast, and I don't know how to do this. Us. Long distance. Any of it." Liam took his hand, his grip firm. "We don't have to have it all figured out. We just have to try. I'm not giving up on you, Grant. Not now, not ever." Grant nodded, tears stinging his eyes. They spent the night wrapped in each other, the city's hum a distant lullaby. But when morning came, Grant's flight loomed, and the reality of leaving hit hard. At the airport, Liam pulled him into a fierce hug. "We'll make this work," he said, his voice thick. "I'll call you every day. I'll visit. Whatever it takes." Grant clung to him, memorizing the feel of Liam's arms, the scent of his cologne. "I love you," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Liam's eyes widened, then softened. "I love you too." The words carried Grant through the flight back to Chicago, through the empty days that followed. They texted constantly, called every night, but the distance was a constant ache. Grant threw himself into work, sketching designs that poured his longing onto the page. Liam sent photos of New York, of his new apartment, of the coffee shop he thought Grant would love. 2 weeks later, Liam flew back for a weekend. They spent it in Grant's apartment, cooking meals, watching movies, pretending the distance didn't exist. But when Liam left again, the ache returned, sharper than before. Grant started researching jobs in New York, a quiet hope taking root. He didn't tell Liam, not yet, not until he was sure. He applied to a few design firms, his portfolio polished to perfection. The idea of moving was terrifying, but the idea of losing Liam was worse. One night, during a late call, Liam's voice was heavy. "I miss you so much it hurts," he said. "I keep thinking about that day in the mall, when I held your hand. I wish I'd done it sooner." Grant's throat tightened. "Me too. But we're here now. That's what matters." They kept going, navigating the messiness of long distance with stubborn determination. Some days were harder than others, filled with missed calls and unspoken fears. But every conversation, every visit, reminded Grant why he was fighting for this. 3 months later, Grant stood in his Chicago apartment, surrounded by boxes. The lease was up, and a job offer from a New York design firm sat on his counter, a single sheet of paper that held the weight of his future. He hadn't told Liam yet, wanting it to be a surprise. The idea of showing up in New York, of building a life together, made his heart race with equal parts fear and excitement. The past months had been a test of endurance. Long distance was brutal, a constant push and pull of love and loneliness. There were nights when Grant doubted everything, when the silence between calls felt like a chasm. But Liam's voice, his laughter, his stubborn refusal to give up, kept Grant grounded. He flew to New York on a crisp January morning, his stomach knotted with nerves. Liam thought he was coming for a weekend visit, nothing more. Grant had packed light, but his heart was heavy with the weight of what he was about to do. Liam met him at the airport, his grin as bright as ever. "You're here," he said, pulling Grant into a hug that felt like home. "I missed you." Grant clung to him, his voice muffled against Liam's shoulder. "Missed you too." They spent the day wandering the city, revisiting their favorite spots from that first weekend. At the High Line, Grant stopped, his hand finding Liam's. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. Liam's brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Grant said, a smile breaking through. "I got a job here. In New York. I'm moving." Liam's eyes widened, his mouth falling open. You're serious?" Grant nodded, pulling the offer letter from his pocket. "I start in 2 weeks. I want to be here. With you." Liam let out a laugh, half disbelief, half joy, and pulled Grant into a kiss that tasted like winter air and promise. "You're crazy," he said against Grant's lips. "And I love you for it." They spent the weekend planning, talking about apartments, jobs, the life they could build together. It wasn't perfect. There were still fears, still uncertainties. But for the first time, Grant felt like they were on the same page, building something real. The move wasn't easy. Grant said goodbye to Chicago, to the life he'd known, with a mix of sadness and hope. Mia threw him a going-away party, her eyes shining with pride. "You're braver than you think," she told him, hugging him tight. In New York, Grant and Liam found a small apartment in Brooklyn, the kind with creaky floors and 2 small closets. They fought over furniture, laughed over burnt dinners, and fell into bed each night wrapped in each other. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were still moments of doubt, of fear that they'd moved too fast. But every morning, waking up next to Liam, Grant knew he'd made the right choice. One evening, as they sat on their tiny balcony, the city sprawling below, Liam took Grant's hand. "You know," he said, his voice soft, "that day in the mall, when I held your hand. I was terrified, but it was the best decision I ever made." Grant smiled, squeezing his hand. "Mine too." They sat there, watching the city lights, 2 men who'd found each other against all odds. The journey hadn't been easy, and the road ahead would have its challenges. But they'd learned that love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, taking risks, and holding on through the mess. And as the stars began to peek through the city's glow, Grant knew they'd be okay. Together, they could face anything.